And so we can begin. So if you'll bow your heads, please. Nui Matmo, I'm going to pray. Mama Gosnan Kawab Mishnach Jayat, Grandfather God, watch over everyone. Shimon Mishnach, have pity on us. Menedokum Mishnach, think peacefully of us. Eminguyak Minome Bimadzuan, we are asking for a good life. Egwech Shku Mino, Widok Tadwak, Je Bode Wadmi. Thank you for the new spirit of community in the Potawatomi. Egwech Jakshigigo Gagestoyen, thank you for everything you have created. Egwech Mingum and Gugwis Jesus, thank you for giving us your son Jesus. Eel. Amen.
Amen.
And if we could have the roll call, please. Secretary Treasurer Trousdale. No, I'm supposed to say, yeah, Shogun. Shogun.
Okay.
I will have some opening remarks. It is a very pleasant feeling to have everyone here and not have that screen up there to squint at. And John Bursaw suggested that we have a half-year meeting, that at least once every 6 months that we get together as a group, give you the opportunity to see the progress or not progress, basically what's going on here, and be able to take back news of those things that are of interest to you and your people in your district. So we would certainly entertain that thought. It could be a short one where we could turn it around in a weekend where you don't have, miss a day of work. By the way, how many folks are still working full-time?
Some days it feels like it.
So,
Define full-time.
define full-time, yeah. So basically, about half of us are full-time. So we'd have to make it a weekend turnaround where you came in, travel out Friday afternoon, do it Saturday and back on Sunday, one of those things. Unless you're one of the idle rich, which a number of you are, you could come and stay for a week or two and gamble.
We could host them in Rossville.
We could host them in Rossville, or we could hang them by their heels out by the road too.
I like the one we did in Tucson, Chairman.
How'd we do that?
That was the district people, I think. But we all met at the Marriott in Tucson. We had the university come in and they were working with us with regard to.
The Harvard.
Was that?
Oh, that was the Harvard thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Harvard.
That
Yeah.
was good, Gene.
We could make arrangements for our mid-year conference of the legislature to have a special feature about it that we were dealing with, besides the familiarity with what activities are going on at the tribe. We could also make that coincide with one of the outside Indian organizations' information, and like I say, there's a number of opportunities that we would have where we didn't have the pressure of having 4,000 or 5,000 people
Mark, this
to
is
see to
Linda.
their welfare.
I'm going to put you on my phone and put you on speaker. Okay, let me turn it up as high as I can. This is Mark Johnson.
Do you want me to have them put?
He said,
Morning, Mark.
Morning, Chairman.
now, Mark, are you going to be able to hear everything from
Sure.
there? Okay, I'm going to put my phone over there by the chairman's. Now, let me Here, let me turn.
And turn it up.
No, I turned it up as high as I can, but what about incoming calls? I don't know.
Okay. Okay, we can have our roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett.
Shoda.
Vice Chairman Capps.
Shoda.
Secretary Treasurer Trousdale. Shoda. Representative Bowden.
Shoda.
Representative Barrett.
Shoda.
Representative Eve Marie Carney.
Showed up.
Representative Bursall.
Shoda.
Representative Payne.
Shoda.
Representative Dave Carney.
Shoda.
Representative Mark Johnson.
Showed up.
Representative Lambert.
Showed up.
Representative Whistler.
Shoda.
Representative Milo.
Shoda.
Representative Wesselhoff.
Shoda.
Representative Walters.
Shoda.
Representative Smithlhofer.
Shoda.
16 present.
16 present, no absent. We have a quorum. If we could have the minutes of the previous meeting of May 18th, 2023.
Citizen Potawatomi Nation minutes, quarterly legislative meeting, May 18th, 2023. Present, Chairman Barrett, Vice Chairman Capps, Secretary Treasurer Trousdale, Representatives Barrett, Bursall, Bowden, Dave Carney, Eve Marie Carney, Johnson, Lambert, Payne, Walters, Wesselhoff, and Whistler. Absent was Representative Smithlhofer. Guests were Greg Quinlan, Jason Smalley, Chris Abel, and Jamie Mocha. Chairman Barrett called the meeting to order at 5:55 p.m., followed by the invocation. First item of business, minutes from the previous legislative meeting held March 2nd, 2023. Motion to approve the minutes as read was made by Representative Bowden, second by Representative Lambert. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Second item of business, Resolution 23-42-RNG, a resolution approving the rescheduling of the quarterly meeting of the Tribal Legislature from Thursday, May 25th, 2023 to Thursday, May 18th, 2023. Motion to approve Resolution 23-41-RNG was made by Representative Whistler, second by Representative Bursall. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Third item of business, Resolution 23-43-LCOE, a resolution for the voluntary relinquishment of Robert Grant Baker. Motion to table Resolution 23-42-LCOE was made by Representative Walters, second by Representative Wesselhoff. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Fourth item of business, Resolution 23-44-LCOE, a resolution for the conditional relinquishment of Tricia Lynn Tripp Blake. Motion to approve Resolution 23-43-LCOE was made by Representative Barrett, seconded by Representative Carney, Dave Carney. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Fifth item of business, Resolution 23-45-LCOE, a conditional relinquishment of Claude Anthony Blevins. Motion to approve Resolution 23-44-LCOE was made by Representative Payne, seconded by Representative Milo. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Sixth item of business, Resolution 23-46-LCOE, a resolution enrolling 181 applicants into the membership of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Motion to approve Resolution 23-45-LCOE was made by Representative Whistler, seconded by by Vice Chairman Capps. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. Seventh item of business, Resolution 23-47-HHS, a resolution supporting an increase in funding for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation Sanitation Facilities Construction Program, Public Law 86-121, for new and light new scattered homes offered to the United States Indian Health Services. Motion to approve Resolution 23-47-HHS was made by Representative Eve Marie Carney, seconded by Representative Lambert. Motion passed 15 in favor, 1 absent. At this time, Representative Milo had to leave the meeting. Eighth item of business, Resolution 23-48-JPS, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's application for funding under the Department of Homeland Security Federal Emergency Management Agency Fiscal Year 2023 Tribal Homeland Security Grant Program. Motion to approve Resolution 23-48-JPS was made by Representative Johnson, seconded by Representative Walters. Motion passed 14 in favor, 2 absent. Ninth item of business, Resolution 23-49-JPS, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's application for funding under the United States Department of Justice Fiscal Year 2023 Office for Victims of Crime Tribal Victim Services Set-Aside Formula Program. Motion to approve Resolution 23-49-JPS was made by Representative Eve Marie Carney, seconded by Representative Westhoff. Motion passed 14 in favor, 2 absent. 10th item of business, Resolution 23-50-NR, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's application for funding under the United States Department of Transportation Federal Highway Administration Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant. Motion to approve Resolution 23-50-NR was made by Representative Whistler, seconded by Representative Barrett. Motion passed, 14 in favor, 2 absent. At this time, Representative Johnson had to leave the meeting. 11th item of business, Resolution 23-51-TCNA, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's application for funding under the National Park Service's fiscal year 2023 Tribal Historic Preservation Office Grant Program. Motion to approve Resolution 23-51-TCNA was made by Representative Dave Carney, seconded by Representative Bersall. Motion passed, 13 in favor, 3 absent. 12th item of business, Resolution 23-52-TCNA, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Memorandum of Understanding with the Arizona Board of Regents, the University of Arizona. Motion to approve Resolution 23-52-TCNA was made by Representative Payne, seconded by Representative Lambert. Motion passed, 13 in favor, 3 absent. 13th item of business, Resolution 23-53-ED&C, a resolution approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's application for funding under the United States Environmental Protection Agency Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. Motion to approve Resolution 23-53-ED&C was made by Representative Eve Marie Carney, seconded by Representative Wesselhoff. Motion passed, 13 in favor, 3 absent. At 7:30, legislature recessed to go into an executive session. At 8:15, legislature reconvened. 14th item of business, adjournment. Motion to adjourn was made by Representative Walters, seconded by Representative Barrett. Motion passed, 13 in favor, 3 absent.
Are there any additions, deletions, corrections, or discussion? Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as read.
So moved.
Motion made by Representative Spittlekofer. Is there a second? Representative Randy Payne makes the second. Roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett.
Koenig.
Vice Chairman Capps.
Koenig.
Secretary Treasurer Trousdale. Koenig. Representative Bowden.
Koenig.
Representative Barrett.
Koenig.
Representative Eve Marie Carney.
Koenig.
Representative Bersall.
Koenig.
Representative Payne.
Koenig.
Representative Dave Carney.
Koenig.
Representative Johnson.
Koenig. Representative Lambert.
Koenig.
Representative Whistler.
Koenig.
Representative Milo.
Koenig.
Representative Wesselhoff.
Koenig.
Representative Walters.
Koenig.
Representative Spindlecoffer.
Koenig.
16 in favor, 0 opposed.
16 in favor, 0 opposed. The minutes are approved. Next is Resolution 2401 on the Committee of the Whole for Appropriations. You could read that into the record, please.
Resolution 24-01-APP, a resolution authorizing the tribal chairman or his designee to open one or more interest-bearing cash accounts with F&M Bank. Whereas the Citizen Potawatomi Nation is a federally recognized tribe of American Indians with constitutional authority under the Act of June 18, 1934, and Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act of June 26, 1936, and whereas the Citizen Potawatomi Nation has sovereign powers that are inherent in tribal tradition, derived from a history of organized self-government since time immemorial, and recognized by treaties with the United States and in the Constitution of the United States. And whereas Article 4, Section 3 of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation Constitution provides for a separation of powers of tribal government by the reservation and delegation of specific powers to other entities of the tribal government, and except for these specific limitations, all other general powers of government are embodied in the legislature's authority to enact legislation, transact business, and otherwise speak and act on behalf of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation in all matters on which the nation is empowered to act now or in the future. And whereas the Citizen Potawatomi Nation receives federal and state, in the form of federal pass-throughs, public funds for the benefit and operation of tribal programs that help satisfy the federal government's treaty trust responsibilities to the nation and to Native Americans within the nation's service territory. And whereas the Citizen Potawatomi Nation may place these excess public funds in interest-bearing, insured, or collateralized accounts that meet all requirements for federal and state public funds, and thereby earn interest on these public funds until said funds are needed to fulfill their intended contractual purposes. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the legislature of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation that a resolution authorizing the tribal chairman or his designee to open one or more interest-bearing accounts with F&M Bank, provided that these accounts meet all the requirements for federal and state public funds, is hereby approved.
First of all, F&M Bank is, Farmers and Merchants Bank is owned by the Anderson family, Potawatomi family, and they have been in business for 75 years or so or more. Under all banks' regulatory requirements, we have to maintain a ratio between our capital, which is money that's basically is idle at the bank, is there as a guarantee against a run on the bank by depositors. So we maintain this ratio of deposits of cash and our capital. We have money in other banks in order to keep the pressure on our capital from changing. I mean, there was us being forced to put additional capital in instead of reserving those funds to be reloaned. So we have some short-term, what we call hot money, that short-term federal grant funds that come in that require us to go through a capital generation and creation process that is easier for us to take the short-term funds as long as we're meeting all of our other capital to ratio conditions for capital to deposits. And what we're asking the legislature to approve is to put some of those cash deposits on a short-term basis in F&M Bank. They regularly participate loans with us, and we participate loans with them, along with First Pauls Valley National, owned by the Grimmett family. Those two Potawatomi banks are two of our most active participants in loans that we generate at the bank. So that's what this resolution is about. Secretary Treasurer Trousdale, if you have any other comments you want to make about it.
Yes. As you may or may not know, Jonathan Grimmett sits on our bank board. They are LaRue family descendants. And John Tom Anderson sits on our bank board as well. Both of them are presidents of their banks. John Anderson, the gentleman who was the wisest Saturday, he owns controlling stock of F&M and has sat on our bank board until he retired. So very strong banks. Pauls Valley is about $325 million. F&M is about $650 million. So it's kind of right in that wheelhouse where the exchange and participation of loans is really beneficial to the nation. We also, just as a reminder, remember that we have funds at BOK, Bank of Oklahoma, and the tide has turned considerably. We got very close to having to pay for deposit money, because we were handling so much money. That is thankfully not the case today. We are on the F&M deposit and on our other deposits, we are getting 4.5%. We have approximately $60 million still in BOK, and as the chairman stated, as we bring this our capital structure, as it will bear the responsibility of the deposits at Sovereign Bank, we'll continue to bring those deposits in. We bring them in every month, but we have to maintain that balance. When you're thinking of capital, the too big to fail folks are somewhere in the 7 to 8% range. We are currently at about 13%, which is very strong capital position, but sometimes we're looked a little bit differently because of our ownership. So we maintain a higher capital ratio, which is fine. but we'll continue to bring those funds into deposit, and that will fuel the loan growth for Sovereign when, as we continue to progress towards the $1 billion mark. It's also it's important to understand that these funds are not funds that we could invest in longer term investments because of the liquid nature that we need to maintain. And that's one of the benefits that dealing with Pauls Valley and the Andersons at F&M, we have a lot more flexibility because they're tribal members. So if we need to draw down funds and we hadn't planned to do it, because we ladder funds so that they roll off every month, but if we needed to access that money, the answer would always be yes.
So Dwayne, in other words, usually we would not bring this to the legislature because the bank is their own entity and they have governing authority with the Federal Reserve. Are we doing this because they are Potawatomi tribal members?
No, we've had a practice of having a resolution whenever we invested anything outside of what was already established, be it Sovereign Bank or be it trust funds investments, which manage their own monies.
Okay.
When we invested in BOK, you guys might recall that we asked for your permission then.
I don't remember that.
Question, Dwayne. The interest rate is based upon what the current market rate that would be getting, or something less than the current, but higher than the regular savings account. And it's at quick funds, like you said, it's short term and we can draw down from it.
Yeah, to be more precise, what we'll do is we'll take $10 million from BOK and deposit it in F&M in $2 million CDs laddered with no more than 12 month.
Yeah, it's a short term.
Dwayne, what of our total capital, what's the percentage that we're moving over here, roughly? Are we looking at 3%, 10%?
Oh,
Approximately.
10 million, the 10 million.
10 million? So the percentage really is very small
Very small,
of our total.
very small.
Right. And it's really not considered capital if it's in BOK. It's an investment.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, that's a good point, Chairman. We're not moving capital. The capital is staying at Sovereign.
Right.
That's where our
That's what I was
capital
curious
is.
about.
Yeah, all we're
Capital
moving
remains the
is
same, we're not risking any capital.
we're just moving a deposit from BOK to F&M,
Okay, thank you.
and it's 3% of current deposits.
We always get the top rating from our bank examiners on safety and soundness because of the ratio of capital to deposits. Ours is always higher. The federal government, when we first bought a bank charter back in 1989, required us to maintain a 2% higher capital ratio than non-Indian owned banks. But I think a lot of that had to do with the condition of the bank at the time we bought it. We bought it from the FDIC and it was in trouble and bought it at below book. So their concern was that we didn't have sufficient capital or earnings to keep the bank within the minimum capital ratios to deposits. But we have proven the government wrong since then and never had our capital fall below 10%. And most banks operate now with 7 to 8.
Right.
So with our 12 or 13 where we are right now, we always receive the highest rating on safety and soundness standards that the examiners give. So.
Thank you.
Dwayne, can you explain or briefly the difference between sweep accounts and these accounts?
Yeah, the sweep accounts by the book are 100% liquid. So a typical sweep account would work if you were using a revolving letter of credit or an instrument of that nature. When you make a deposit, today, that money is swept out of your checking account and reduces your liability on your revolver, pays down your loan. In these type of accounts, they're just certificates of deposit. We commit for a certain period of time to receive a certain interest rate in return. And that's what I was speaking of with
Yeah, thank you.
with our closely held
Yeah.
group. We can, there would not be a penalty associated if we said, hey, we need $6 million tomorrow.
Were we not using F&M and Pauls Valley National as basically as correspondent banks, we have a regular borrowing arrangement with Bankers Bank and with the Federal Reserve,
Federal Home Loan.
the Federal Home Loan Board, and Bankers Bank. We can go to them for short-term capital to maintain our capital ratio if we have a great big loan go out, or someone comes in and Morris pays off a great big loan, and all of a sudden we got a big wad of cash that we have to come up with capital out of the money that we used to earn with. We have to end up freezing it by sticking it in capital because of that deposit.
We have avenues to do whatever we want on a short-term or long-term basis, which is very comforting to
Yeah.
know that our bank is well protected and well managed. You know.
It's our capitalization rate is very strong amongst our peer groups. The nation has never been in a better spot as far as liquidity. So when we do these things, it's never a risk of are we fearful that we'd have to call monies back or anything like that. We're nowhere near that type of position. When we bought First State Bank, our capital, we might remind you, we paid cash for the bank, and with the help of the nation. But our capital went to 10%. We were 18 or 19% at the time. We went to 10%, and now we've built back up to 12.5%, 13%. But most of the banks you'll see, they're all operating. Banks our size are operating, 10%, 10.5%. So we're not allowed to speak about what is called a camel rating that banks are evaluated on. But as the chairman likes to phrase it, that there's no bank with a higher rating as the nation's bank.
And we can't say what the number is, but
It's a good one.
It's good.
It's a good one.
Good is good.
Nobody's ahead of us.
Chairman, can I ask just a, Pauls Valley Bank, do we have an existing relationship with Paul, or are we fixing to,
no, we do have an existing relationship.
so the only account we're really open?
Yeah, Jonathan Grimmett, who's the president of Pauls Valley, sits on our board.
Okay.
And we have loan participations with them where we'll buy 10% or 20% of a loan, or a third, something of that nature. And they buy loan participations from us if we have a loan that bumps up against our loan limit size. Your capital is what establishes your loan limit. So what we try to do is keep our loan limit balanced to where we're not having to go out and get money to make a loan that we can loan from
Yes.
our own reserves.
Well, my question, do we already have a pre-existing relationship, an account open with?
We do not have
Like-
an account open with
Is that
Pauls
something
Valley
we're
National.
planning on doing?
None are deposit.
We don't have any monies deposited in their bank. If we do, we would come back to you. That'll be something that unless they requested us to do it, we probably wouldn't do. And if we did, it would be relatively small in nature, because remember, the relationship for capital and deposits at Sovereign is what we're managing. Well, the Grimmets have to manage theirs too, and because our smaller. So we could upset their ratios in a hurry if we put a lot of money in their bank. So it's not feasible.
If we stuck $500,000 in Falls Valley National, with them being a $300 million bank, they'd probably have to go out to Bankers Bank or to
Yeah.
Homeland.
Well, they would just essentially ask us not to do it.
Yeah, they'd have to go somewhere and
'Cause they
borrow
would-
money to put in the capital.
They'd have to put in capital. And they just went through a stock consolidation. It's a family bank, so there's a lot of family members, and Jonathan and his brother Patrick, with Jack Grimmett Jr., who used to sit on our board before Jonathan, they purchased all the stock back from the rest of the family, so their capital isn't nearly as high as ours. So, but I'll say this, we've probably garnered 15+ million in loan participations that the Grimmets have brought us. On loan participations, if folks don't understand how that works, so we have a legal lending limit based on our capital structure at the bank, okay? So Sovereign Bank was at about 15 million before we changed our bank charter that got approved a couple of months ago, and state banking has a different advance rate. So we were able to go to a $30 million loan limit. That's our legal limit. So if we had a loan that we wanted to make for $30 million, we would have the authority to do that under the regulators. But we also have in-house limits, because a bank will never advance that much. So our in-house limit, I think, is 18 million. And then if any one single customer goes over, I believe it's 14 million, they have to have board approval. So when you get a loan, let's say we got a $20 million loan application, and we have faith in the credit, then if it was originated at Sovereign, we may take 12 million of that or 14 million of that, and then we would push the other out to a Pauls Valley National or an F&M, and they would take the remainder, and that's the loan participation. And then they do the same thing to us. If they have a credit that's outside of their in-house limit, or for whatever reason, because you don't want too much concentration in any one loan or any one customer, then we would buy that participation. In the case of Pauls Valley, they have a customer who they have maxed out their lending authority to that customer. Very strong customer. So now every time that customer wants to borrow money, they go to Pauls Valley, and Pauls Valley moves it to Sovereign, and we usually write 100% of it because we're a bigger
So
bank.
really, you're spreading the risk, really, when you're doing that too.
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to, in anything, you don't want to get too greedy. You want to, it's all about mitigating risk.
Yeah, we have 19 million in-house, I think is our number.
It's
Yeah, I think
19 million.
It's in-house, okay.
We just had a situation on,
We,
let's see, Friday.
yeah, we approved one for, they went $1 million or so over, I think.
Yeah.
So we approved it.
So Dwayne, as you're talking about different limits, that's as of today, but there can be variation after
Right.
appropriate consideration and policy changes within the bank.
As the bank grows, those numbers grow. And then all of the loan officers have small limits, usually. I say small limits. The senior loan officers have like a $500,000 approval authority. And then the loan committee has an approval authority. The chief lending officer, who is the number 2 at the bank, has an authority. Brian Kane, the CEO, and then the board. The board actually sees any loan that is $2 million on a single loan or in the aggregate for a customer. We approve all of those.
We actually see smaller ones if they're mortgages. One of the reasons I think that's been a real restriction on why other Indian tribes aren't in the banking business is if you're a self-governance tribe, all of your funding under 477 now all comes in one giant wad. Well, if you own the bank where you get $230 million arrives all in one great big wad, then that dings our, all of a sudden we have to go raise capital in order to take that deposit. And so rather than whack our whack our capital ratio, we'll put that with F&M, we'll put that with Paul's Valley National or Bank of Oklahoma, or any of the other correspondent banks that we have. That's a bad problem. That's not a bad problem to have, but for other tribes that are in small towns, like tribes in Anadarko or places like that, there's no local bank that's going to be able to handle that kind of a one-time deposit on behalf of a tribe. So a lot of tribes don't want to own a bank because they'd be required to use it. There would also be an inclination on the part of their people to consider the assets of the bank to be distributable assets, which they're not. They're other, we've got other people's money there.
I do have a question relating to what was said by Mr. Kane at our meeting, our council meeting. He said that there was no loan that was overdue excess of 30 days.
30 days.
And that sort of, my jaw sort of dropped at that, but I'm wondering, is that because we don't have a lot of consumer loans?
A lot of what?
Consumer loans, or can you explain that?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
We're very aggressive about collections.
Just on top of it.
Yeah.
They're on top of
When
it.
they if they get 3 days late, a week late, they get a visit from us, not just a call. They get a banker in their office. We want to know what's wrong. Are they failing? And have somebody run off with all the money?
But you're talking, as you said, that's about a business loan.
That's commercial.
That's commercial lending.
No,
Do
we have-
consumer individual lending?
Yes, we have diversification across the portfolio. And
We have some car loans that are behind. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, look, when you're in banking, the first thing you do is make sure the credits or the loans are good loans. Okay, don't loan money to people that you don't have full faith that they're going to be able to pay you back. Now, things happen, situations happen, economy happens, Democrats get elected.
Oh,
Boo.
But that's the thing. You
All boats are floating.
yes, all boats are floating. You make sure that you do your due diligence then. You don't try to say, oh, I think we've got a problem. If there is plenty of business in the market, and this was one of the big things about us making this acquisition into Oklahoma City metro market, because you know what? Lawton, Shawnee has a pretty finite set of loans, right, and borrowers that we would accept. We get in a much larger market, much bigger loan values. So we do a lot of evaluation. You get a credit memo from Sovereign Bank is 25 to 40 pages of more than financial data and personal backgrounds and things like that that you'd ever want to look at. And we probably look at probably 15 to 20 a month that reaches the board level. And, you know, you do your diligence there. But yes, that was an unbelievable fact. And that's why I can tell you right now that we've got 2 loans that are in the 30-day. He was giving you year-end numbers. We have 2 loans in the 30-day column that the total loan, not the past due portion, but the total loan is less than $300,000 of those 2 loans. And that's our collection effort.
And we clean up, we clean those loans up as often as we possibly can, and we maintain a real strong bad loan fund.
Yeah, the allowance for doubtful accounts. We remember that the bank is the only taxable entity that the nation owns. Okay, so we accrue, it's 1.25% of loan growth to the allowance for doubtful accounts. So you essentially have this piggy bank stacking up with funds. So in a worst case scenario, somebody doesn't pay us back, we take that loss out of the allowance and it doesn't hit net income. The good thing about the allowance is the monies that we put in there come out of net income and are not taxable at that point. Okay, now there's a limit to how much you can load your allowance up, because a lot of times it's certainly based on a percentage of loans, but also on delinquency history. So our auditors have let us contribute a 1.25%. And that's one reason why you'll see when you've got a bank in a growth mode like we certainly are, you're going to see a lot of net income. You may see the bank's budget is for this year is $7.3 million in net income after tax. Okay, so we're so if you take like the say $600,000 a month in net income, we may put $250,000 of that into the allowance. So net income is being tamped down. Okay, this is probably a good time to tell you that yes, we are on a 7.3 million. We are on a projection of 8.4 million through the first 4 months. Remember, they're on a calendar year at the bank. But we're going to change that. We've been moving deposits in the bank, and because they are taxable, we're getting paid. We've changed the deposit ratio, deposit rate on the nation's deposits to 4.5%, because that's the market rate now. We've got rego issues that we can't do something for ourselves that we don't do for others or in the market. So we're going to go from a 0.5% return on our deposits to a 4.5%. And those are some of the numbers I'm working on now, that will draw down in the last half, Q3 and Q4, that'll draw down probably $3.5+ million of earnings. But that's a way for us to get the earnings of the bank to the nation in a non-taxed position. So
we also, in the structure in which we changed our charter from a federal charter to a state charter, we doubled the amount of money we could loan against capital. But we also ended up having the capability within the holding company that holds the stock on behalf of the nation, it now can make capital acquisitions and use the depreciation on those pieces of equipment. For instance, a slot machine, the entire value of a slot machine can be deducted in 3 years. And, we sit on, at any given time, we're sitting on $40 million worth of slot machines and related equipment. And we never have before now been able to use the standard depreciation against our income taxes. It's because we've always been able to manage the bank where we didn't have to pay a lot of tax because we put money into the loan loss reserve. And if the regulator said we had excessive money in the loan loss reserve, we'd say, well, you guys started us off at being putting in a higher number of higher ratio of capital to deposits because we're an Indian tribe. All of a sudden, you're complaining about we're being too safe. So we played that for quite a long time, and they quit buying it. So we now we're going to have to use our depreciation and capital investments. But that's a good thing because we still don't pay an equivalent tax rate of over 1
Yeah.
at best.
At best.
Could you remind people too, who owns the bank?
Excuse me?
Can you remind everyone who owns the bank?
Certainly. The nation owns, now they own 75% of Sovereign National, or Sovereign Bank rather, and then the trust fund of the nations owns the remaining 25%.
And that came from an arrangement we had where whenever the back wall of the bank fell in, because we put the coin from the first coin-operated slot machines we had, the night depository fell in and crashed through the plywood floor of the old bank. And we were 2 days getting it out from underneath the crawl space underneath the bank with car jacks and stuff. And I personally got to get underneath the bank and help jack the thing up. But we had to build a new bank that was much larger than what the bank at that time, we were a $20 million bank at that time, could afford. We needed to build a larger building. And so the government told us that we could charge rent to the bank based on 40% of our gross profit. 60% of our gross profit, we could charge the bank rent for that much money. And so we had all those years where every time that we got into a taxable, profitable situation that was taxable, 60% of it went to rent. We took the rent and put it right back into capital by buying stock. We built up the balance in the trust account by buying the stock from the bank at book, which the regulators would allow us to buy it at book value, and then selling, the trust would then sell the stock that they bought at book to the tribe itself at book and a half, which was fair market, conservative fair market.
We're not allowed to do that any longer, which is why we're employing these other vehicles to get as many tax-free dollars back to the nation as possible. But that also kind of dovetails into, I know you guys were hanging on every word I said Saturday. But I said that the debt of the enterprises was, I believe, just a little over $34 million. And that was an increase from last year, and that may run counterintuitive to what we're saying now, and it does, but at the nation, there always seems to be an opportunity that if we're thinking about these things correctly, and the chairman has a special gift of of seeing these opportunities, and then it gets thrown to Linda and I to figure out, okay, how does that work without going to jail type thing, which we're big on that at the executive end of the building, not going to jail. So it went, the debt went up by about $7 million because we reduce debt every month. We're reducing debt. There's some debt that we don't want to reduce because the cost of funds is so cheap, and we're borrowing them from ourselves. So the interest goes right back to us. So there's not much of a motivation to pay those things off. We don't owe any external entity any money. It's all in-house. But that went up $7 million because of a new market tax credit that we borrowed money on to buy the equipment at Sovereign Pipe. We were going to buy the equipment anyway, but we found an opportunity with the new market tax credits that of that $7 million purchase, it saved the nation about $1.4 million if we borrowed the money through that vehicle. So it's a little counterintuitive when you hear those numbers, but there's always a reason, and it's always to make us more money.
The only new market tax credit area in the city of Shawnee or in Pottawatomie County is an area that goes from Hardesty Road to the river, from 177 to Brangus Road. So basically, we own 99.2% of all of the new market tax credit area in Pottawatomie County.
Well, what's missing? The Sonic station or the Sonic?
Yeah, the Sonic's the only thing we don't own. Well, that and the junk place, the
Oh, that's right.
Ball Pipe and Supply. That land's actually owned by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, and is leased to them, along with the steel yard across the street from it.
Has the landlord ever seen it lately?
No.
No, they haven't. The reason that the railroad won't sell it is that would necessitate a phase 2 environmental examination, and they've been dumping PCBs and machine shop cutting oil and everything else on that ground for 50 years, and that's the only Superfund site in Pottawatomie County.
Driving by there the other day, it looks like it's getting worse.
It is getting worse. And buried under the road, about 12 feet deep, is the old pit that they used to have to work on where the roundhouse was. The roundhouse sat in the middle of Hardesty Road back in my youth, and where they worked on the locomotives, and they would strip the asbestos off of the steam chambers on the locomotives and drop it in the bottom of that pit and then cover them back over with dirt again. And so there's about a 2.5 foot thick layer of asbestos buried underneath Hardesty Road that keeps that as a Superfund site over there. We don't dig over there.
Sounds like one shouldn't eat at Sonic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disparage Sonic, but kind of close by.
Well, it's a mile.
A mile, okay.
As long as you don't breathe it, it's fine.
Yeah, just don't breathe.
Get it to go.
Chairman, can I ask, just for my information?
Sure.
The bank does home loans, and I think this comes down to the question of over 30 days, because you think a home loan.
Yeah.
When they take a home loan application and they approve it, those are sold off to another mortgage company. In other words, we're not holding that note.
No, we don't.
So the default on that note would go to another company, yeah.
Right. We keep, either keep a small percentage or we keep an origination fee.
Right.
Sometimes we have like there's a home down in Lawton that's $1 million and a half house, and it's owned by two doctors that are married to each other, and they own a big clinic, and they're rich as creases. We hold a piece of that one rather than put it out on the market because we know it's an exceptionally good credit, and we get a good interest rate on it. But we hardly own, we own very, very few residential mortgages.
And I
where
think
we
that
keep them in
explains a lot that there's not that.
We do,
Higher rate.
we do have some housing loans that we
Construction.
hold at the bank.
Construction.
No, we have some old housing loans that we actually hold at the
Oh, yeah.
bank.
From the
Yes.
housing
For the
authority.
housing.
Yes.
The
But
section.
still, those aren't consumer loans. Those
Right.
are governmental type.
Yeah,
Usually, the only
section-
time we keep a mortgage is if it's an existing customer that has a large relationship with us. Otherwise, we package them and sell them off.
Sell them all.
And we make monies in our mortgage department off of the fees and closing costs. So they'll generate on an average month, they'll generate a little over 6 digits a month in the
Well, I'm
mortgage
sure we get
department.
a lot, I'm sure there are a lot of defaulted business loans, and there are a ton of defaulted home loans. We just don't hold those home loans. We push them off to someone
Yeah,
else
we
or
don't
sold
hold
them.
them.
So,
No.
Right. We have a pipeline that every month we're moving them out of the bank. But we do construction loans, home construction loans too.
The short-term construction loans. We also Section 184 Indian housing loans. We get a better fee on originating those.
Really?
And the largest packager of Section 184 Indian housing loans that goes out on the open market with them is Chickasaw National. That's their specialty.
of course.
By buying up all the 184 loans in the state. We're going to start getting into 184s, but they are, it's a specialty loan, and there aren't as many secondary loan pools for 184s. We're trying to get a combination, Section 184, Hearth Act leasehold mortgage combination where they all go in the same tranche, so you get the same rate on them as 184s, and they acts like a FHA or VA guarantee that if there's a default on the loan, the government pays the default. So we're trying to get that done where we can package our any mortgage that we make on trust land, we keep title to the trust land, but have a mortgage on the leasehold. And we were the first tribe in the United States to sign the Hearth Act, which is the Leasehold Mortgage Act, and we're still trying to put together a secondary market for it, and we're getting closer. But it will be the first ones in the United States tribe to get that done if we get it done. But we're going to try to do that in conjunction with other tribally owned banks. There are now 9 other tribally owned banks. We're going to try to combine those together with their 184s and make a new market for it.
Have the interest rate increases over the past year affected the interest rate on the 184 loans?
Yes.
They've gone up.
It's all tied together.
Yeah, the secondary market, when they buy those loans from the originators of they bid those up, and most of that money follows it follows the discount rate, I guess, more than anything else.
Yeah, you're going to continue to see that rate increase, and I think Chairman Powell has indicated exactly what he's going to do. So this isn't over, but this is historic. What's happened in the last year with the interest rates and the shortness of term, and then the 5.5% increase over a short amount of term. What's happening, even though our bank numbers are great, we're fighting interest rate compression daily down there, because when you have $650 million in loans, they're not all adjustable. About 1/3 of our loans are on a floating rate. 2/3 of our loans are fixed. Okay, so we've got many loans that are fixed down in the low 4% area. Okay, So the bank can't fund itself because the bank funds with deposits, right? That's where the money from the loans come from. And I just said, we're getting 4.5% for our deposits. Well, they're going to go over 5. I think they're going to get closer to 6. Well, what do we do with all these 4% loans? Well, that's what you do with them, right? You try to run a little bit leaner, but you have that compression, and that's what we're fighting through at the bank. One of the things that helps us is our new loan growth is so strong that we're able to write more 7 and 7.5 and 7.75% loans. So, we're trying to bridge that gap until it comes back down. But that's the nature of banking.
Average life on a mortgage loan is 7.5 years. So we're really looking at that compression over the second half of the 7.5 years is really that's our riskiest section, I guess.
Yeah, because we have competition, right? And this bank's quoting this bank's quoting that, but if you want it, you can have last look at it, which is always a good spot to be, but, we turn some loans down. We accept some loans at a lower rate because they're bringing $5 million of deposits with them, right? So there's always a trade-off, and that's what we're looking for. And look, Brian runs a great bank. He's got a great team. We've invested a lot in that executive team down there to take us where we think we're headed. But it's a challenge for them every day. That's why on these home loans, we typically would have, if a home loan we're keeping in the bank, as few of those are usually a 3 to 5 year term fixed, but it's only a 3 to 5 year term, and then we're repricing them to not take on any more risk than we have to.
Well, and we have a mandatory concentration from the examiners. We can just have a certain percentage of our loans that are commercial, heavy commercial, light commercial, real estate, consumer loans, automobiles, all these different categories. And before Brian came, when he whose name shall not be spoken was running the bank, he allowed the concentrations to get, because we were doing virtually no mortgage loans, concentration got so out of whack that we got a ding on our regulatory notes. Not enough to affect our Camel rating, but enough that it was a mention in our audit, and that just can't happen. That's not right.
Do we see any further expansion of the bank as far as branches?
Well, we own the oldest charter in the state of Oklahoma. We own the #1 charter in the state of Oklahoma out in Canute, Oklahoma. The bank there was the very first bank put together after statehood. So the move from of the original First State down to the new building and the purchase of the Bank of America branch building out in Edmond, I would guess that that if something happens that gives us a higher growth rate in other communities, Oklahoma City has expanded north and west and south just about to the maximum range that it can expand without getting into other cities' territories. The one direction that Oklahoma City can come at will right now, and the development is going to really increase, is east towards us. So I see Choctaw and Hara and McLeod and Jones and what's the other little town in there next to Jones?
Luther. Luther's next to Jones.
Yeah, Luther, and all of those we're going to see exponential growth in those over the next 5 years. And that's one of the reasons that we're going to build a new clinic and a new child development center and a new grocery store over in Choctaw, over on 23rd and Indian Meridian Road, is because that's the fastest growing community in the Oklahoma City area. And I think that we have a branch in Midwest City already, and I think that the next move would probably be to that 160 acres we have in Choctaw. We'd probably put a branch back there, would be the next growth place that I see us having. But that's probably 5 years out.
Yeah, when you think about growth, like the chairman is speaking of, you can grow two ways. You can grow organically, like the chairman's speaking, another branch. I agree with his philosophy about where and when. Like the B of A building that we purchased, or about to purchase, close on in Edmond. We've got a loan production office up there. We're renting space, so we'll get rid of the lease. We'll have the building. We bought it for a song. So that will give us an opportunity for organic growth there. As great as the bank's numbers are, it's a highly regulated industry. Okay? They will take us to task over our growth rate. We will have to defend that. That's one reason that we're beefing up capital. That's one reason why we're beefing up the loan loss reserves, right? Our regulators are very similar to auditors. They're doomsday prophesiers, right? That
Chicken Little is what I call it.
Chicken Little, the sky is always falling. So we're making plans right now, and not just making plans, fulfilling plans to shore those arguments up on our side. When we go over $1 billion, that's going to be a whole new level of hey, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. We'll have to add on personnel at the bank, totally for regulatory compliance. They won't bring $1 to our bank, which, that's hard for me to swallow. But this growth, this is what you do with growth. The other avenue is acquisition growth. One of the good things is the industry is small enough and the nation's reputation is big enough that once you get a name as an acquirer, deals will get brought to you, phone calls will be made, we will have off-market opportunities. We actually have one right now that the chairman and vice chairman don't even know about because I got it Thursday evening. So it's a bank acquisition opportunity for us. I've read their deal book, and it looks good. It's about a $275 million bank.
Tulsa Market?
Yeah, no, not Tulsa. It's here. It's here in our market. Will we buy it? I have no idea. I think it might be we might have some customer concentration issues. So we'll vet all that stuff out, but so as not to waste their time, I get it, I'll review it, then I'll bring it to them and say, hey, this is what it is, these are what my findings were, and they'll review it, chairman and vice chairman, and say whether we want to do it or not, in coordination with the bank. So you never know. In my business, I look at 100 deals and take 4 or 5 of them, So you don't just take it because it's available. It's got to be good for us, and that's the great thing is with the loans and acquisitions and expansions. We're doing better than we've ever done in banking, and that's not an accident. We've got great people, and Our job is to keep great people in those roles and watch them perform and advise them on what the nation wants. But we don't have to do anything. We don't have to make a loan. If one of the three of us is uncomfortable about a given loan, hey, we just won't do it. There's no reason to take risk at the bank. And that has worked out really well for us. Same thing on acquisition. If we think it's too soon, if we think there's an issue with this or that, it's a rare position where you can afford to say no. But given the nature of the tribe itself, that's the best place for us to be.
Well, the internal management means that we're not beholden to outside people who are directing us and expect us to make money.
Right.
So that's unique.
That is unique, and that's what I remind the bankers all the time is they have the best ownership group in Oklahoma because we don't make demands of the bank.
And we don't have to go out and borrow money to relend it.
No.
We generate enough cash within our own operations that we can fund the bank without having to borrow money. So many banks in Oklahoma that are larger than us, half of what they've loaned out is hot money. I mean, they're constantly reborrowing short-term funds in order to keep enough cash in to keep their loan rate up. We don't do that because that's when you have hot money going in and out, and then you turn around and have some bad debt losses, and then the government comes in and says you have to beef up your bad debt loss funding. All of a sudden you can get a squeeze on your operation, a squeeze on capital. It comes at you all at once and from three directions. So it's we've gone through a couple of crises where our former president got us into one where got to where we didn't feel like going to the meetings, did we?
This is not a lot of fun, but when you start chasing those type of things, when you start chasing profitability over aggressively, you get into a Silicon Bank situation, really, because that's what they did. They got way overextended, and this hot money that the chairman's speaking of, that's always the most expensive money in the bank, and it's the shortest term.
Before we move on to the next topic, I recommend we give our VLPs 2 hours of college credit for banking.
Yeah, right after they pay the tuition fee.
Always money hungry.
Hey, you guys ought to be happy. I'm working for the nation.
Okay, the next.
Call the question.
We are.
Chairman, I have,
Yes.
in regard to Resolution 2401, I appreciate the 70-something minute crash course in banking. I have confidence that y'all are doing well. I have enough of knowledge to be able to understand that. I don't have enough confidence to be able to explain this to my constituents. I'm very supportive of this, but I'm going to abstain from voting on this piece just because I can't possibly explain it to anybody who asks me about it. So I just want you to know that you have my support, but I'm willing to abstain on this vote.
Call the question on Resolution 2401 appropriations, because we could have, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
So moved.
Second.
So moved. Motion made by Representative Whistler, seconded by Representative Walters. Roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett,
Koenig.
Vice Chairman Capps,
Conagay.
Secretary Treasurer Trousdale, Koenig, Representative Bowden,
Koenig.
Representative Barrett,
Conagay.
Representative Eve Marie Carney,
Koenig.
Representative Bursaw,
Conagay.
Representative Payne, Representative Dave Carney.
is an education bill. You can read that into the record, please.
Resolution 24-02-ED, a resolution pursuant to Public Law 102-477 regarding consolidation of employment training and educational services for fiscal years 2024 to 2029. First three whereas, are the same as read in the previous resolution. The fourth whereas, Assistant Potawatomi Nation administers Department of Health and Human Services Child Care Development Block Grant and Community Services Block Grant, LIHEAP, DOJ Reentry Grant, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Adult Vocational Training, Employment Assistant, Higher Education, Adult Education, General Assistance, Child Assistance, Assistance with Care and Custodial Adults, Burial Assistance, Mercy Assistance, and Johnson O'Malley programs, as well as the Department of Labor Workforce Investment Act and Family Preservation programs under Title IX-B 1 and 2. And whereas Congress has enacted Public Law 102- Title 4-B 1 and 2. And whereas Congress has enacted Public Law 102-477, which allows tribes to voluntarily consolidate employment training and related programs, as well as the funding received for those programs, and allows greater flexibility in the development, coordination, and operation. And whereas funding for the 477 program is primarily formula-driven and appropriated annually by the federal agencies, and is estimated based on fiscal year 2023 actual funding to be $20,669,690 for each fiscal year 2024 through 2029. Now therefore be it resolved by the legislature of the Assistant Potawatomi Nation that a resolution consolidating these employment and training and related programs and authorizing them to be administered in accordance with the nation's 102-477 plan is hereby approved. Now therefore be it further resolved that by this resolution and consistent with the separation of powers defined in the Constitution, if awarded, an appropriation of federal funds up to $20,669,690 per year from the 477 fund for the implementation, negotiation, operation, enforcement, procurement, settlement, and/or completion of this contract, compact, regulation, or agreement by the tribal chairman or his designate is hereby authorized.
Is there any discussion, issues?
Just a question under paragraph that now therefore be it resolved. We talk about the nation's 102-477. Should we not change that to Public Law 102-477?
Well, the nation has a plan for its
We
operation.
use that same number?
Of the federal.
I have a comment, it's just here, this is incredibly terrific. This gives us so much more flexibility, right?
I'm sorry.
This gives us so much more flexibility
Yes.
with respect to these funds to allocate them as we wish.
It's the old before we had 477, we'd have 30 or so little miniature federal programs and they wasted money so unbelievably because you had to have a director, an assistant director, and all this stuff that you had to do to comply with the federal government, forcing Indian tribes to run a miniature federal government. The consolidation of the 477, in addition to bringing all this money in at one time and helping us at the bank, it also lets us have one set, very effective and capable set of management team to manage those funds. And it also, an awful lot of these programs cross over on each other. You'll have a Department of Labor program and you'll have a Department of Health and Human Services program, and you'll have one person who qualifies for both programs and has needs for both programs. But you'll have, before we'd have a prohibition where you'd have to do one year and one the next year, and it was a crazy way to do it. But yeah, the 477 is one of the best things that's happened to federal programs ever. in my opinion. Is there a motion to approve the resolution as read? Approved. Motion made by Representative Birsaw, seconded by Representative Dave Carney. On Roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett.
Montague?
Vice Chairman Katz.
Okay.
Secretary Treasurer Traustahl. Montague. Representative Bowden. Representative Barrett. Representative Eva Marie Carney. Representative Bersall.
Montague.
Representative Payne.
Montague.
Representative Dave Carney.
Montague.
Representative Johnson. Representative Lambert. Representative Whistler. Representative Milo.
Montague.
Representative Wesselhoff.
Montague.
Representative Walters. Representative Spinkelhofer.
Montague.
16 in favor, 0 opposed.
16 in favor, 0 opposed, it's approved. Next is Resolution 2403, TCNA. And you could read that into the record, please.
Resolution 24-03-TCNA, a resolution approving the Citizen Following Nations application for funding under the United States Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Living Language Grant Program. First three whereas are the same as read in the previous resolution. The fourth whereas, Bureau of Indian Affairs, through the Office of Indian Economic Development, has announced availability of fiscal year 2023 funds for native language immersion projects to ensure continuing revitalization of the Native American languages and long-term sustainable success. And whereas the Citizen Potawatomi Nation is proposing the development of a Master's Apprentice Language Program in which apprentices will be hired to learn Potawatomi using an immersion model, progressing in mastery each year for 3 years. Once apprentices have adequate skill, they will teach at various CPN enterprise and parks. And whereas the Master Apprentice Language Project is 3 years, with a total project cost not to exceed $300,000 per year. Now therefore be it resolved by the legislature of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation that a resolution supporting and approving the Citizen Potawatomi Nation's proposed applications for funding through the fiscal year 2023 Living Language Grant Program is hereby approved. Now therefore be it further resolved that by act of this resolution and consistent with the separation of powers defined in the Constitution, if awarded, an appropriation of federal funds up to $900,000 for the fiscal year 2023 Living Language Grant Program Fund for the implementation, negotiation, operation, enforcement, procurement, settlement, and/or completion of this contract, compact, regulation, or agreement by the tribal chairman or his designate is hereby authorized.
Is there any discussion?
Chairman,
Yes.
don't we already have, I think, 4 people that we're putting into this program as apprentices? Have we already hired some? I was under the impression we hired about 4.
Those are interns. We had interns for the summer.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, is that part of this program?
no.
It's totally separate.
No,
Okay,
it's a
that's
different
what I thought.
And what we have to be careful of is that we don't have someone who comes in and interns just so they can run for office. And then as soon as they're out, as soon as they lose, then they disappear. But we need to take politics out of the language program. And I will be doing that.
Chairman,
You know that,
can I ask, I don't know if we've already developed the plan, I don't know how this happened, but when the plan is developed, at least see what it is, and just get the structure of the plan. I think this is great. Absolutely. I agree with you on your other comments, but I'd just like to see what the,
And I think, we ought to bring the apprentices up, and if we could devote 10 minutes in every meeting or 15 minutes in every meeting and learn 1 or 2 or 5 new words, something like that, that'd be a good thing.
So Andy brought up a good point, because whenever we write for a grant like this, we really have to have a plan when we submit it. Now, sometimes you can change it a little bit, but we have to have a plan whenever we submit for a grant.
I have a follow-up to that. I would love to hear if we actually get these grants. I know that we see the applications and things, but we don't, a lot of times, we, the legislators, don't see that afterwards.
I have that report to send. You have the report.
I will
Do
send
they
it.
have it?
No, I haven't
You're
sent
going
it
to
yet.
send it out. She's going to send that report out.
Thank you.
We get that from self-governance. So they keep up with all of that.
I'm excited about this. I'm well supported.
The language department
You
has
may
to
want
run.
to explain to the DOT about how we apply for grants and how that funding and what it does in various forms here in the nation. They may have to know.
I believe that they know. Actually, we have to apply for anything new like this. This is actually new. But we also have to reapply each time the cycle is up for our regular grants. So we see a lot of resolutions, and a lot of them are for grant money that we get on a yearly basis. I have recently found out that some tribes actually vote for resolutions on a yearly basis. Like they might pass one resolution for several different programs that they get constantly. So we know that we're going to get the money for certain grants, for certain programs each year, or we hope we are, unless something happens to our government. We plan to get money each year for our programs. And I found out that some tribes vote on yearly resolutions, and they don't have as many resolutions as we have in our program. Our legislature constantly votes on resolution, and we would on a new one, but we would vote yearly on some of the grants that we see constantly. So that's something that we could consider ourselves. I don't know if anyone would want to even talk about that, but I have found that out not very long ago. So yes, we do apply for a lot of grants, and we apply for a lot of new grants. Some of those we get, just like Mr. Milo is saying, he would like to see what we do get and what we don't get, because sometimes we bring something forward to our people, to our legislature, and we don't really get that grant. So it's good that we see those. We kind of know it in-house here in administration, but I don't think our legislators realize it, whether we get that grant or not. So there's a lot of work to do in order to maintain grants and to get new ones. And so it's constant. It keeps us busy.
He's listening.
I think that y'all know a lot about it. Now, have you gone to self-governance yet? Yeah, so they know a lot, Dwayne.
Yeah, that's perfect. I didn't know if you guys had been through self-governance. But the nation always has grants working, because as you heard in this one, several of them are multi-year. So a lot of the folks, that's how they're compensated, that's how the department is paid for. Their expenses, it all comes from these federal funds that we apply for. And we usually have, what, $130 million of grants working on any given day.
We used to say 130, I don't know, we might.
Might be more than that now then. So it's a meaningful part of our budget process. That's why you see the government funds and the business enterprise funds. You see both branches of our nation, because the enterprise funds are from the grocery stores and the banks, casinos and things like that. We have a lot greater flexibility with what we do with the profits. And most of the time that is reinvesting in things like Sovereign Pipe or making a bank acquisition, because the inflation rate causes everything to be more expensive next year than it was this year. Plus, we add membership. We add more memberships than people walk on. So we have a higher head count. So we have, by design, we have to make more money every year, or we would have to cut services.
Right.
Which would probably be unpopular for Rocky.
She has a question, yes.
So if you apply for a grant that you're expecting to get and you don't get it, will the nation itself finance that project, or will a pin be put in it and wait to reapply in the next cycle?
It depends on how necessary that services that grant program has been providing. Most of the time, the way we operate, we'll have a carryover of funds from previous years, and we usually can operate, if we don't get funded for a particular year, we can operate with a combination of tribal funds and carryover and last another year, and we'll take another shot at it if we think it's a necessary service. But most of the time, if we're operating on carryover and on some tribal funds, we're phasing that program out or consolidating the services of those people into another grant program or another area where we can help them. Again, it depends on how many people are served and how vital that service is to the operation of the nation. That wasn't a very good answer. But it's not an abrupt cutoff whenever we get to be notified that we're not going to do it for another year. We usually get that about 6 months ahead of time, and then we figure out a way to stretch our money out to where we last another year.
This one is a real good example of that. This is for 3 years, and there's a strong possibility that this won't be refunded. And whenever that happens, we would probably try to fund it somehow, but just probably a portion of it, not all of it.
And one of the great things about being our own sovereign nation and being self-determined is we're not going to go after grants that don't meet our needs.
Right.
So we're stepping up and saying this is something that's important to us, and that's probably more likely that we will be finding a way to do it if we don't get it funded in year one.
Right, this resolution, and think about it this way. This resolution and like the language department, the Cultural Heritage Center, the legislature has determined that those are good uses of our funds, right? Our enterprise income funds. So the nation established a language department, funded the language department, and that put us in a great position to make this grant application because we've already got the foundations and much more than the foundations of the language department. So these can be very competitive, and Linda knows a whole lot more about this than I do, but that sets us up in a good spot where we can get these additional grants to build on to a commitment that we've already made, because that matters. The commitment that we've already made matters. Cultural Heritage Center, the same thing.
When you say you apply for a 3-year grant, after that 3 years, would you reapply or would you not get a grant anymore?
Perhaps you will reapply if the money is still there from the government. It just depends if it comes out as a request. You would have to have a request from the government to even apply.
And if the government doesn't think that the amount of, the number of people who learn the language, for instance, or the number of people who were exposed to these apprentices, if when it's all over with, if the Congress or the agency of the government that's providing the funding looks at that and says that's cost too much money per person and it wasn't worth it, then if the program disappears because it's in a bad, has a bad reputation with its funding agency, then those are the ones that we'll cut off.
Vice Chairman, and the grants where we only out 50% or some other percentage, don't we get virtually all of those approved?
Well,
When we have to partner?
Yeah, sometimes we may not get approval of those that we have to participate with. I was just looking to see if we really don't need a match on this.
No.
So,
I think this is the largest opportunity we've ever seen in languages.
it is.
It is.
Almost $1 million it is. Because usually there's small amounts of money for language and for the Heritage Center in general. The Heritage Center is basically financed by profits of the nation, because it takes a lot of money to run the Heritage Center. John Bersall knows. He was the director for several years. So it takes a lot of money to operate that big building, and profits operate most of it instead of getting grants.
And the other is, let's say we create 3 or 4 apprentices, and we keep them employed under salary for 2-3 years or so. At some juncture, when the funding from the federal government dries up on this, it falls out of favor with the federal government, there will be pressure to try to keep those people on the payroll. And oftentimes, if we don't have a lot of people who are looking to learn the language that would require 3 or 4 different instructors, we can't keep those people busy. So big problem then becomes, do you get good applicants for a job that we're not able to absolutely assure is going to be a permanent job? So some of these things are really tough to do. I think that if you can have people that are already active in different programs that preserve the culture of the language, or in some way, operate from the Heritage Center, and you can add them on as apprentices for the language, then there's a permanent job that carries them, and they're also, we integrate language instruction into their job duties. It's often a hard thing to do because so many of the cultural things are politically sensitive, depending on what control of Congress and the Appropriations Committee in the House. Sometimes these things are political footballs, and they don't get refunded. Chair will entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Motion made by Representative Wesselhoff. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Eva Marie Carney. Roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett.
Collegiate.
Vice Chairman Katz. Secretary Treasurer Charles Honeygate. Representative Bowden. Representative Barrett. Representative Eva Marie Carney. Representative Bersall. Representative Payne. Representative Dave Carney. Representative Johnson. Representative Lambert. Representative Whistler. Representative Milo. Representative Westhoff. Representative Walters. Representative Spindlecoffer. 16 in favor, 0 opposed.
16 in favor, 0 opposed. It is approved. Next is resolution 2404, JNPS.
Resolution 24-04-JNPS, a resolution approving the System Following Nation's application for funding under the Department of Homeland Security Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Fiscal Year 2023 Grant Program. First 3 whereas, are the same as read in the previous resolution. 4th whereas, the System Following Nation has identified a need to support its information technology structure through cybersecurity enhancement to improve the overall security level of information at the nation. And whereas the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has announced the availability of grant funds to prevent, protect against, respond to, and recover from terrorist attacks and strengthen national preparedness and resilience. And whereas the Citizen Following Nation is eligible for and desires to apply for funding in an amount up to $500,000 under the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency Grant Program with an expected 20% match requirement. Now therefore be it resolved by the legislature of the Citizen Following Nation that a resolution approving the funding request to the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Grant Program is hereby approved.
Now therefore be it further resolved that by act of this resolution and consistent with the separation of powers defined in the Constitution, if awarded an appropriation of federal funds up to $500,000 from the fiscal year 23 Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Grant Program for the implementation, negotiation, operation, enforcement, procurement, settlement, and/or completion of this contract, compact, regulation, or agreement by the tribal chairman or his designate is hereby authorized.
I assume that this is all expenditures are going to be almost entirely software. So is there any discussion?
I do have a question. This is one that does have an expected match.
20% match.
Do we not usually have in the last now therefore paragraph something that also authorizes expenditure of the match?
It usually does, but since they say the 20%, they just didn't enumerate either way.
But that, we don't need that language in order to have the money paid for out of.
Most of the time it's in there, but no.
Right, a lot of times it's either in kind or carried over.
Okay, got it.
Sharon, recently, I've had problems getting into our site, things down or whatever, and I don't know whether it had been compromised or whatever, but how are these funds actually going to be used? Are we going to be getting into some new programs or what? When we're talking about the security.
We've been, the whole business of cybersecurity attacks that we receive, they've gotten more and more sophisticated, and as we've gotten bigger, and as the world has recognizes that in addition to operating an Indian tribe, we're also operating a bank, and we're operating a community development corporation and industry. All of the publicity that goes around the world about how much more sophisticated our operation is, the more we are exposed to cyber attacks.
Right.
We've had 6 really nasty ones hit us this year. One of them shut us down for a portion of the day.
Right.
We just have to stay with our nose to the grindstone. We have to keep spending money on new software. We've changed security software probably every 24 months.
Don't get me wrong, I'm very much in favor of it. I was just curious the direction we were going to take as far as if we're going to be hiring some more people to get into the program, or if we're going to be purchasing specific programs for that purpose.
I think this is probably almost all the software, cybersecurity software.
I just want to comment on the security that we have and the capabilities of the system that's already there. The people that are running it, they are something else. And just to prove a point, I bought a new laptop. And I was trying to download everything on the laptop, and I mean, they shut me down in a hurry. And I'm taking it in, I don't know, again, because I don't know about computers that I screw up. I'm like, on, and finally Chris realized, he looked at what was shut down, and he said, "Oh, that's Gene." But it's like, they didn't know, so I mean, they just knocked it down real quick, and I was trying to download everything. So I just, they were just right on the spot there, so.
They send you a key to wind your computer up.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I threw something from my experience being chief of police and all that, I'm shocked at the number of times an organization, even a small organization, I would bet you that there's 30 or 40 attempts a week to get into our computer system here. It only takes one successful to really screw you up. So you have to have something that's almost bulletproof. But I have to tell you, I'm shocked. A lot of the bigger agencies know thousands of attempts a week, thousands of attempts from overseas, Romania, Eastern Europe. I think that
Well, and some of the significant difficulties are right now, we need to harden against computer capacity 8 or 10 years from now. Because that's what's being recognized in the industry, is that we are less than a decade away from significant advantages in computer processing ability, and if we don't have software program and walls against that now, then when we get there, it'll be too late to come back. So this is money well spent.
Well, in AI, as for instance, the whole artificial intelligence issue never really touched us until we got into the pipe manufacturing business. And those machines, there's a very significant AI software piece in those machines and keeping them, those long lengths and continuous runs on spec. That's all done with artificial intelligence and keeping that as an island where someone can't get into it is really important.
Yeah, I agree with Gene, because when I arrived Thursday, on with my laptop, I had no speaker capability or microphone. And I went to the group, took them about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, everything back operations. Our people do a fantastic job.
I've experienced some of that website issue that you're talking about too, so I'm sure they're working on that, but
Right.
that should be separate and apart from this. And the level of sophistication, and I know the nation's a big target, but it is, it's reached a level that it gets a little concerning at times. So we use specific forms and things like that. Of course, with the movement of money, usually it takes two of us to sign off, and usually Linda and I are working with accounting to move money. But you know, we've been the victim of hackers where they'll have our form, and how this happens I don't know. They'll have our form, and the chairman has already signed off on it. You know, that's where it came from. The form came from his email, and which would be unusual. But that's, you can have all the software and things like that, but we also need to be communicating with each other, which we do all the time. So usually by the time it gets for a sign off, Linda's already vetted everything, and she's ready to go, and I've already been talked to about it. So we have a dual signature situation. That goes on all the checks themselves, actually, too.
That's good, yeah.
How many checks do you see a day?
Well, a lot.
Thank you for narrowing that down for me.
You would see the final approval, between Jamie, Lynette, and I, we see every tiny check that goes through the system for the week.
And that's normally how many thousand?
Oh golly, it's several thousand usually. A lot.
Okay, we are calling the question. Chairman, entertain a motion to approve this resolution as read. Motion made by Representative David Barrett. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Gene Lambert. Roll call, please.
Chairman Barrett.
Funigate.
Vice Chairman Capps.
Okay.
Secretary Treasurer Trousdale Funigate. Representative Bowden.
Conagay.
Representative Barrett.
Conagay.
Representative Eva Marie Carney.
Conagay.
Representative Berthold. Representative Payne.
Conagay.
Representative Dave Carney.
Conagay.
Representative Johnson.
Conagay.
Representative Chrysler. Representative Milo.
Conagay.
Representative Wesselhall.
Conagay.
Representative Walters. Representative Spilkopper.
Conagay.
16 in favor, 0 opposed.
In favor, 0 opposed, it is approved. Next is resolution 2405, natural resources. If you could read that into the record, please.
Resolution 24-05-NR, a resolution approving a fee to trust acquisition application to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and a request for trust acquisition of the non-gaming on-reservation Hardesty grocery property. First three whereas, as same as read in the previous resolution, the fourth whereas, Citizen Following Nation is making application to the Southern Plains Regional Office of the Bureau of Indian Affairs to request transfer of fee simple title to the United States of America in trust for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation.
And whereas the legislature believes that increasing the tribal land base furthers the pursuit of tribal self-determination and allows future generations of tribal leaders to have the flexibility to use the land for the health, welfare, and sovereignty of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And whereas Section 5 of the Indian Reorganization Act of June 18, 1934 provides authority for the fee to trust acquisition, and whereas the on property is on reservation or within the former reservation boundaries of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, legally described in Attachment A and listed in the Potawatomi County Treasurer's records as parcel ID number 0000-30-010-004-007-00 and parcel ID number 00030-010-004-027-000 Hardesty Grocery. And whereas the property was purchased with tribal funds for non-gaming use and the land to which the Citizen Potawatomi Nation owns the service rights is in fee simple, is not currently under lease and has no improvements. And whereas the current proposed land use is economic development, tribal self-determination, and increasing tribal land base which furthers the pursuit of tribal self-determination and allows future generations of tribal leaders to have the flexibility to use land for the health, welfare, and sovereignty of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and now therefore be it further resolved by the legislature of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation that a resolution supporting the fee to trust acquisition application to the Southern Plains Regional Office of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and trust acquisition of Hardesty Grocery property is hereby approved.
Are there any additions, deletions, corrections, or discussion?
I got a question. Mr. Chairman, so this is where the hotel's going to go and not the casino, correct? On the Hardesty property?
This is actually going to be a parking place, parking lot, a piece of the parking lot, and a piece of the road expansion to 5 lanes. It's going to take about a third of that property when we expand the Hardesty Road to 5 lanes from this existing lane.
So the parking lot won't apply to the casino, right? That's why it's a non-gaming.
It's generally parking lot.
Okay.
It'll actually be between the frontage road and the expansion of Hardesty Road will take up, that lot's only 120 feet wide. So it's going to really get consumed to where it won't be an integral part of the gaming beverage.
What I want to say about this is you have actually passed the resolution on the grocery store law to go into trust before, but now that the building is off from it, we have to do it again. So I don't know if any of you remember or not, but we have passed one. And so it wasn't in trust yet, and so we have to do this again in order to get this in trust. The government's BIA is real particular about everything, so you would think that it wouldn't make any difference because that building is gone, but you have to do a new resolution if it's not in trust yet.
The insurance Linda put on that building will pay for the fee to trust acquisition.
Will we get compensation for the right of way, or are we donating for the roads?
We're donating it. There were two, there was a diesel tank and a gasoline tank directly under what was the east face, the drive under the east face of that property. And those tanks and the area around the tanks were remediated under the state leaking tank fund, and they came in and did the subsurface mitigation and so on. So we were able to do the phase 1 environmental in-house because the state had already done a mitigation project on that. It's gone through 2 mitigation projects, one from a leak from us, the other from a leak from him. So it's had a pretty good eye on it. And we didn't want to leave it, the way we placed it, we didn't want that piece of concrete to be anything other than part of the internal road passage, not anywhere near the road.
Our roads are private roads, apartments, white.
White Road. We fund our parking lots from our roads. The other thing was is that the ownership of the property, on Facebook, were trying to gin up the idea that that was a historical structure. And it wasn't.
Mr. Chairman, and you're pretty sure that we're gonna have a hotel available for the next festival? No.
Be nice, but I can't absolutely guarantee that. But it would be nice if we could get both of them built in a year. We're letting them in the same contract, so.
I was thinking in your speech to the council that you intimated that that might be available, and I was thinking people are already thinking, wow, I gotta make reservations now. But
I'm the eternal optimist.
What the chairman didn't know when he gave that is, and I've talked with Guernsey, our engineers, we've got some supply side, supply chain issues that we're working around, so, yeah, we're hopeful, but I just, odds are against us.
It's thick as metal studs, and they're hard to find.
According to ARPA, we're supposed